Good morning, Virgo. W. There is a name that lives in a particular part of your mind. Not the active, occupied part, not the part that moves through daily tasks and ordinary conversations and the manageable surface of the present, but the quieter part, the part that activates in the spaces between things, in the exhale before sleep, in the strange middle territory of a dream that doesn't quite release its logic into morning. In the moment when something ordinary, a song, a street corner, a quality of light reaches into the stored landscape of your memory and briefly, without permission, brings someone back, someone you have not spoken to, someone you made a decision about or who made a decision about you and from whom the line of communication has since gone dark. That person, the one who just came to mind, this reflection is about them. If this found you today, I don't think it's accidental that you're here. I think something has been trying to surface for a while, and I think part of you already knows it. A theme appearing strongly in this reflection is the particular quality of weight that exists in a severed connection that was never fully resolved. Because there is a meaningful difference felt in the body, tracked in the psyche, present in ways that don't always reach conscious articulation between a connection that ended cleanly and a connection that simply stopped. A clean ending has a quality of completion to it. Both people understood what happened. Both people, in some form, acknowledged the ending. The grief was allowed to be grief. The processing had a shape that could be moved through, but a connection that simply stopped, that went from present to absent without the ceremony of a real ending, tends to leave something behind. Not always, obviously, not always in a way that demands constant attention, but the particular residue of something that was real enough to matter but never arrived at the kind of closure that would have allowed it to settle into genuine peace. An energy that may be present for many of you is the haunting quality of that particular residue. Because haunting is the right word for it, not in the dramatic sense of something terrible lurking, but in the more precise sense of a presence that persists beyond its official ending, that continues to occupy space in the interior even after the exterior relationship has gone silent, that surfaces at unexpected moments with unexpected clarity, carrying a weight that feels disproportionate to something that is officially over. And a pattern worth noticing here is that this disproportionate weight tends to be information rather than irrationality. It tends to indicate not that something is wrong with the person experiencing it, but that the connection itself carried more genuine substance than the manner of its ending was able to properly honor. There is something almost sorrowful about the particular way a significant connection goes silent without resolution. The way two people who once occupied the foreground of each other's lives quietly recede to the periphery and then, eventually, to a place that has no official name, not friends, not enemies, not estranged exactly, but simply absent from each other in a way that feels both final and somehow still unfinished. And some of you are carrying the weight of exactly that kind of absence right now, not as a wound that is constantly bleeding, but as a scar that every now and then makes itself felt in a way that reminds you it is still there. This reflection invites you to consider what this particular silence has actually cost you, not only what it protected you from, not only the reasoning that supported it, but the specific texture of what is absent from your life that was present before, and whether that cost has ever been honestly accounted for in the full complexity of what it represents. Here's the thing about the connections we stop speaking to. They don't simply disappear. They go underground. They continue in the interior in the private processing that happens without the other person's participation, in the ongoing revision of the shared narrative, in the quiet arguments and reconciliations and realizations that take place entirely within one person's mind, because the other person is no longer available for the actual conversation. And this interior continuation is both necessary and, in certain ways, limited. It is necessary because processing has to happen somewhere, and if the exterior relationship is closed, the interior is the only available space. But it is limited because interior processing, by its nature, lacks the one element that could most efficiently bring it toward resolution: the actual other person, their actual perspective, their actual experience of what happened. The information that exists only in the space between two people that neither one can access alone. And this is one of the more quietly painful aspects of the kind of silence that arrives without resolution. It forces an inherently incomplete form of processing. The one who is left with the interior work, working only with their own version of events, their own interpretation of what was said and unsaid, their own reconstruction of what the other person felt or intended or understood, can only ever arrive at a partial picture. A picture that is, however carefully constructed, missing the dimension that the other person's genuine presence would provide. And some of you have been working from that partial picture for long enough that it has begun to feel like the complete one, has begun to feel settled and certain and final in ways that the actual incompleteness of it does not entirely warrant. An energy that may be present here is the particular quality of longing that belongs not necessarily to the person themselves, but to the unfinished conversation, the things that were never said, the questions that were never answered, the version of events that only one person's interior holds, and that therefore remains permanently provisional, always capable of being rewritten, always subject to revision, because it was never arrived at through the most direct route available, the route of genuine, honest, mutual exchange. And for some of you, that unfinished conversation has been living in its underground state for long enough that it has developed its own strange kind of permanence, its own settled quality. The frozen quality of something that has been at rest in the dark for so long that it no longer expects to move. This reflection invites you to consider what the unfinished conversation actually contains, what was never said, what was never asked, what understanding was never reached, and whether some part of you still carries the specific ache of a truth that needed to be heard by the other person but never found its way through. An energy that may be present in this moment is one of something stirring in exactly that frozen place. Not necessarily because action is required, not necessarily because the silence must be broken or the connection must be rebuilt or anything must change in the external landscape of the situation, but because something in the interior, some part of the processing that has been running in the background of your life without resolution, may have arrived at a point where it is ready to be looked at more directly, more honestly, with the kind of clear, unsentimental attention that the passage of time sometimes makes possible in ways that the heat of the original situation did not. There is a particular quality that arrives when a significant amount of time has passed since the ending of something real. A quality of distance that is different from the distance of the immediate aftermath, different from the raw, still bleeding quality of a fresh separation. This distance has a kind of clarity to it, a capacity to see the full shape of something that, from inside it, was impossible to perceive in its entirety. And that clarity, when it finally becomes available, tends to carry both more compassion for everyone involved and more honesty about the complexity of what actually happened than the version constructed in the immediate wake of the silence was capable of containing. A theme worth sitting with here is the particular courage required to revisit something that has been officially closed, because there is a particular social and psychological pressure around closed things, the expectation that endings should remain ended, that reopening something signals weakness or instability or an inability to move on. But genuine processing, the kind that produces real resolution rather than the mere appearance of it, sometimes requires exactly that kind of revisitation, not necessarily with the other person, sometimes entirely within oneself. The willingness to look again at something that was declared finished and ask, is it actually finished? Have I arrived at the fullest, most honest understanding of what this was and what it means? Or have I simply maintained the conclusion that was easiest to hold in the aftermath of a situation that was more complex than any single conclusion could fully contain? This reflection invites you to consider whether the story you are currently holding about this person and this silence represents your most honest and current understanding of what actually happened, or whether it represents the version that was constructed in the particular emotional weather of the time, which may not be identical to the version available from the cleaner air of the present. And this is where it gets both haunting and, in its way, quietly freeing. Because the most unresolved connections, the ones that continue to surface in the underground of the interior, the ones that resist the official status of finished, tend to be precisely the connections that contain the most real substance, the most genuine feeling, the most authentic version of two people being actually present with each other for whatever duration and in whatever way that presence took. And there is something worth honoring in that, something worth acknowledging rather than simply managing. Because a connection that haunts is a connection that mattered. And something that mattered deserves to be held with more care than the blunt instrument of official silence tends to provide. An energy appearing here is not the suggestion that anything must be done. It is not pressure toward reaching out or reconnecting or disrupting the established state of the silence. It is something quieter and more interior than that. It is simply the invitation to stop pretending that the silence is as settled as it officially appears. To allow yourself, in the privacy of your own interior, with no audience, no performance, no requirement to translate the experience into any particular action, to simply feel the full weight of what this connection was and what its ending cost and what persists in the space where it used to be. That acknowledgement, however private and however unresolved, is itself a form of honoring, a form of giving the connection the quality of genuine attention that the manner of its ending perhaps did not. And sometimes that acknowledgement, simply allowing something to be as significant as it actually was, without the management and the minimizing and the insistence that it is fine, it was the right decision, it is all in the past, is the thing that finally begins to shift the interior weight of it. Not by resolving the external situation. The external situation may remain exactly as it is, but by changing the quality of the relationship to the experience itself, moving from the exhausting posture of maintained certainty of having to continually confirm to oneself that the conclusion was correct and the silence is appropriate towards something more honest and therefore more restful. The posture of someone who has genuinely looked at what is true, held it without judgment, and allowed it to be complex without needing to resolve the complexity prematurely. This reflection invites you to consider what it would feel like to simply allow the memory, the weight, the unfinished quality of it to be fully present for a moment without immediately moving to manage it or justify it or redirect it toward a productive conclusion, and what that quality of honest, unhurried acknowledgement might begin to release in you. The closing energy of this reflection carries something that feels like the particular atmosphere of a house that was once full of life and is now quiet. Not abandoned, the objects are still there, the rooms still hold the shape of what they contained, the walls still carry something of the presence that once moved through them, but still, and in that stillness, something between grief and memory and the strange, unresolvable beauty of things that were real and are now gone. That is the emotional register of this reflection. Not dramatic, not urgent, but deeply, quietly present with something that deserves to be present, with something that has been waiting, with the patience of things that have no choice but to wait for the quality of honest attention that this moment is finally offering. And within that stillness, within the particular quality of this moment of genuine, unguarded attention, there is a question worth sitting with, not about what to do, not about whether to reach toward this person or allow the silence to continue or take any action at all, but a simpler, more interior question, the question of what you actually want, not what is reasonable, not what is safe or wise or consistent with the official position you've maintained, but what you actually want in the most honest, most unguarded, most completely private part of your experience. Because that want, whatever it is information. It is the interior's most direct communication about what has not yet finished, what has not yet reached its genuine completion, what is still beneath all the management and the officiality of the silence alive in you. This reflection invites you to consider what you actually want in relation to this person and this silence, not what is appropriate, not what would look right from the outside, not what the circumstances make possible, but simply what is true in the deepest, most unmanaged, most honestly felt part of your interior experience, and what it would mean to honor that truth, even privately, even without it requiring any particular action. Whatever this person meant to you, whatever the connection was at its most real, before whatever happened that produced the silence, that realness does not disappear simply because the speaking has stopped. It continues to exist in the particular way that significant things continue to exist in the interior of the person who experienced them, in the specific impression they left, in the ways they changed you, shaped you, contributed to the person you have since become. And allowing yourself to acknowledge that, to give it the full, honest, completely private recognition it deserves, is not weakness. It is not an inability to move on. It is, in fact, one of the more courageous things available to a person who has been carrying something real in silence for a long time. Um, the silence between you and this person may continue, or it may not. That belongs entirely to choices and circumstances that this reflection has no authority over. But what you do with the interior experience of the silence, how honestly you allow yourself to feel what it actually contains, how completely you allow the full weight of what this connection was to be acknowledged in the quiet of your own private knowing that is entirely yours. And giving it that quality of honest, complete, unhurried acknowledgement is perhaps the most genuinely freeing thing available to you in this particular moment. Not because it resolves everything, but because it stops the pretending. And in the space where the pretending stops, something real, something that has been waiting a long time in the dark, is finally allowed to simply be.